Hey everybody, welcome back clinical researchers. I've got a very special guest. I'm at DDW in San Diego with Dr. Hazan. We're going to do another interview with Dr. Hazan talking about all her activities as a successful site owner, because there's a lot to unpack there. But right now we're talking about her. See, she's on the level 4 of physicians that do research. Like step 1 is getting into research. Step 2 is getting others to kind of do it for you. Step 3 is scaling it. Step 4 is, hey, like I'm getting into the sponsor side stuff. So anyways, I'm here with Dr. Hazan. She's on level 4. She's creating a drug not a drug. Why don't you explain, Dr. Hazan?
It's a test. So we've heard a lot about the microbiome here, the microbiome there, and really in clinical research, nobody really knows what's going on with the microbiome, right? So I, as inquisitive of a mind as I am, I've been in research, as you know, for 25 years, clinical research. Started at University of Florida when I was accepted as the first woman gastroenterologist for a fellowship. And my first year was as a researcher. And my attending kind of entered me into this whole world of how to do research, how to talk to sponsors, how to conduct a study from phase 1 all the way to phase 4. And so over the years, 25 years in the business, you kind of get the trends, right? So you see the trend. 25 years ago, we were all pushing antibiotics, then it was the PPIs, then it was the anti-inflammatories, and then the biologics for everything, right? And now, unfortunately, we're in the microbiome business. So fortunately or unfortunately. So when we get into putting capsules, 40 billion bugs in a capsule, and we're giving it to cure a disease, I get a little bit concerned about it because, and as a researcher, as a gastroenterologist, having done fecal transplant for my patients with Clostridium difficile, which, as you know, is a bacteria you get from taking antibiotics, I'm a little bit weary of that world because we don't really understand how we are curing C. diff. So I set myself on a path to understand the microbiome. So I decided I'm going to send some of my specimens, fecal material, to different labs. And lo and behold, come to find out, I got 3 different samples. So that already put up like a red flag for me because it's like, what's going on with the field? What's going on with the whole microbiome? And then companies like Viome, Ubiome started coming up, and I said, well, what are the normals? So I became inquisitive and I asked, well, who are your normals? How do you pick a normal? What I realized is there's no normals. You and I are so different from where we are born, from where we went to travel. We have different fingerprints. How could I be compared to you? How could there be a normal period in the microbiome world? So I realized that everything is individualized. We need to get back into an individuality. If we're stepping into the microbiome, we need to understand the microbiome. So I set myself on a little adventure where I went to see Dr. Feingold, who wrote the book on anaerobic bacteria. And I said, Dr. Feingold, what am I seeing when I take a patient's donor, a healthy donor, and I give it to an unhealthy, and I'm able to change a disease? What am I seeing there? And he said to me, interesting you asked this question. I've been working for the last 67 years, analyzing stools, fecal material from different diseases. And here's the protocol for Alzheimer's. Here's a protocol for autism. When you buy the next generation machine to analyze the microbiome, you will find what I've already found by culture and what I have a vision. So I embarked myself on a mission to essentially buy a machine, find a scientist that knew how to, how to sequence the stools, because this is very precise science, right? You're looking at 40 trillion bugs, right, and you have to look per patient and you have to kind of analyze. So I ended up finding the scientist. It was all divine intervention, really. The scientist from a pharmaceutical company that was not happy, who will remain nameless, came and said, you know what, I want to join your path. Then the bioinformatics, who graduated Harvard, said to me, I want to join your path. And little by little, people that worked at Ubiome said to me, I want to join your path. We want to do it clinically. We want to do it ethically. We want to understand. So I took what I know of clinical research, and I said, who better than me as a scientist, as a researcher, to look into the microbiome? Here I am in a family of doctors. We're like, 9 doctors in the family. My sister, as you know, Dr. Liddy Hazan, has been the clinical researcher for most of these drugs that are marketed out there. She has sites in Florida, New York, Vegas, Miami. She's one of the lead researcher in the industry. And so she has accumulated huge databases. I've accumulated huge database of Crohn's patients, ulcerative colitis. And I realized, let's look at this clinically. Let's see what's going on in the microbiome clinically so we can make sense of it. And it may not be in the microbiome. But we need to look at it.
Right.
So as I embarked on this mission, I realized there's a lot of flaws from the collection of the stools, which in the olden days, when you look at the Human Microbiome Project, which was not that long ago, the collection of the stool is really taking a sample from a toilet paper and then analyzing it.
That's what I did.
Well, yeah, but is that accurate? Are we testing your stools?
I have to learn, no.
Or are we testing the toilet paper and the environment around the toilet paper, right? Because all around us is biome. Everything we touch is microbiome. So it needs to be a little bit more fine-tuned. It needs to remove the flaws. And having been in research, you and I know there's standard operating procedures for everything. So I created standard operating procedures from collecting the stools to where do you collect the stools? Do you collect the stool in a tube that you have to transfer? Then that gives you another medium where you can, accumulate more bacteria, microbes that you didn't account for.
Yeah. Now, did you think that, or do you think now that, because a lot of doctors come up with these ideas, but they don't all start from doing research like you did. And our next video is going to be about your site and how you built that. And maybe we can talk a little bit about your sister, but do you think that has helped you in your quest now or in your new venture as a sponsor?
Well, I think there's either the clinician that wants to do GI, right? So for me, I'm a gastroenterologist. There's either the clinician that wants to do GI and basically follows the guideline, comes to these meetings, learns the new cutting edge. And then there's the physician that really does not fit into that mold of doing colonoscopies after colonoscopies or fitting that mold and has more of an inquisitive mind, doesn't necessarily not listen to guidelines, but just has another approach, right? A little bit outside the box. So I think and those are usually the physicians that go into academics. What I realized when I was in academics at University of Florida as a fellow, it was very limited. I didn't have as much leeway to do things that I wanted to do. So being in the private sector allows me to be a little bit more flexible. I don't have to go in front of a hospital IRB that meets every month, but I can use a central IRB that meets once a week. Or the next day, or I can call them and say, can you expedite this research? I really have a patient that can, because research is long, as you know. The moment that you think about a trial, the moment you think about a drug could cure cancer, by the time it gets on the market, it's 20 years later. By then, the patient's no longer. Right. So we need to speed up research a little bit. I think we need to be more proactive, less afraid of working with the agencies and saying, the agencies are there to protect us. Doctors are afraid of FDA, FBI, feds. People are afraid of that. Right. They're not there to, disrupt you. They're there to help you and guide you. So when I go to the FDA, and of course I have a patient that I submitted an IND to the FDA because the patient had metastatic mesothelioma, was considering fecal transplant, and there's no, the precedence on that, right? So I went to the FDA and submitted that. It was interesting to see that the FDA actually gave me great guidelines, things that I didn't even think about, right. Because I'm not an oncologist, I'm just the doctor that does the fecal transplant. So the FDA is there to help. They are bombarded. There's a lot of products out there. And to me, why I went on this path, I'm kind of tired of seeing, this is good for your gut and this is good for your gut. We don't even know what the gut is supposed to look like, or show me the data, in other words. Show me the research that says this drink is good for my gut. Because it may be good for your gut, but may not be good for my gut.
So that's actually a good segue. So in an era of individualized medicine, personalized medicine, which we're entering,
Right.
what advice do you have for the physician out there? Maybe someone just getting out of med school, watches these videos, follows you on LinkedIn, which you should, by the way, Sabine Hazan, right?
Yes.
Is that it on LinkedIn?
Steinberg too in there.
Okay. We'll get links underneath. But what is your advice to them? Like, you know, they're coming out, they're like, okay, I hear you, Dr. Hazan, but what do I do? Do I just start my own site? What do I do?
Well, I think the number one thing is for physicians to be physicians. You know, the number one rule of medicine is do no harm, right? So that's what I trained on. It's do no harm. Make sure the product is safe. Make sure what you're doing is safe for the patients. Make sure you use a method and an approach to treating. Yes, so we've all seen the Arizona study on autism and fecal transplant. We could all start tomorrow a pill for autism, but is that the right way to treat? Are we exchanging one disease for another? Really need to have a method and understanding, and I think rushing to change, to add more drugs, more procedures, writing the data on this, great data, great research, but stepping back a little bit and saying, maybe we need more diagnostic tests. Maybe we need, and that's why I stepped in as a gastroenterologist to open my CLIA lab to make a CLIA assay to kind of understand what am I seeing in the microbiome before I do transplant, after I do transplant. Because we're entering into a world of individualized medicine, I think doctors need to be doctors again. They need to, it's a challenge. It's a definite challenge.
You do it all. For people, I mean, we didn't mention this, but Dr. Hazan has a private practice. Then she does research, like private research, industry-sponsored research. Then she has a lab that she can sell her lab services to any company looking for microbiome tests, right?
Yeah, basically we're looking for partnership with pharmaceutical companies, with doctors, to kind of say, let's look together. Even, and from pretty much like all over the world, to say, let's look at the microbiome together. We want to be the 23andMe of the gut flora. That's my hope, because only when you start looking at the whole planet's microbiome, the diversity is what we need. We need to understand the what is different in India versus India, America, what changed in the microbiome. We're certainly seeing, I was talking to some doctors from India, gastroenterologists. This meeting, by the way, is amazing for that, because it's really talking to doctors from all over the world.
Networking, right?
Well, not only networking, but seeing what's going on in their country. You know, the fact that, you know, celiac sprue, which used to be a white, American, you know, Irish condition, is now in India and is creeping up. Wow. And the doctor said to me, he goes, well, that's because if you look at the South, and I say this because I've diagnosed people that live in America, originally from India, with celiac sprue. And when I tell, in fact, one of my girlfriend is a pediatrician, and I said, you have celiac sprue? And she said, no, impossible. I'm from India. India, you know, people from India don't get celiac sprue. I'm like, here are the markers, you have it. She stopped gluten, and all of a sudden she's way better with her symptoms. So obviously these diseases are approaching other countries. There's a reason behind that, right? So we have to look at that carefully. When you look at China, and I was talking to Dr. Zhang in China, who does 5,000 fecal transplants, you know, in China, and has had very good results with ulcerative colitis and fecal transplant. I'm shocked that ulcerative colitis is in China. You know, again, that's not the population that you would think necessarily to have ulcerative colitis. So something is changing in the food chain, something is changing in the microbiome of the planet that I feel it could be dangerous. And you know, what we've seen when you look at islands in the Pacific, and you see a kid in the Pacific eating the foods from America full of preservatives, and then that island, those kids were skinny, and then they end up by the age of 15, 16 becoming morbidly obese, and by 40 they have diabetes, and then they die by 60. You go, what happened? This is a population that was perfectly eating fish and vegetables, and then all of a sudden they started using foods from abroad and gain weight. So with globalization comes globesity. And so globesity is something we have to pay attention, because if people are dying, you know, look at obesity around the world. The obesity factor is going through the roof all over the world. Is it because we've changed what we were supposed to eat to not? Because the problem is the planet will still survive. The microbes of the planet, will still survive. The humanity is my concern. Will humanity survive when we start introducing 4 billion prescriptions, per year given? Will humanity start surviving when we change the microbiome and remove the diversity?
So your advice is actually good for physicians coming into this new environment. Start with the most practical, be a doctor, treat patients. Research is a good bridge between academic and practical.
And just because you're not academic doesn't mean you cannot do research. I'm not in an academic center, but I still do research. Because if your mind is programmed to understand a systematic approach, how to stay true to your values, to your morals, to helping humanity, none of us go into medicine to make money. We would have gone into the stock market. I could sell shampoos, especially with my hair. I could sell shampoos more than I could sell colonoscopies. I sold colonoscopies for 25 years because I believe I save lives, right? Otherwise, nobody wants to, and especially now with fecal transplant, nobody wants to play with fecal material. Gastroenterologists are not getting paid for that. They are just paid for the colonoscopy procedure itself. It's very complicating to enter the world of research, as you know. Processing investigative, so fecal transplant is considered investigating new drug because it's a biologic.
Yep.
And so it's very complicating to submit one IND at a time.
Do you think if it wasn't that you were a PI before, would it have been as easy for you to do this as a sponsor?
I would have never been able to transition from a gastroenterologist to a to sponsor if I didn't do research, and that's
the key takeaway for these doctors. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, Dr. Hazan, where do they go? And we're going to do another interview on sites now, but where do they go? There's a couple places, right?
So they can go on progenabiome.com, or they can go to Ventura Clinical Trials, or they can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Sabine Hazan Steinberg, I think. And then Twitter, I think I'm Sabine Hazan, MD.
Chris, you're on LinkedIn, Chris.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you want to go the route of research, it is very difficult as well, the takeaway as well, because I think you have to have the heart for it. You have to understand it's 24/7. Sponsors in Japan are calling you at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
I definitely is not something that I would do at the level of other sites. I'm very, very boutique because I have 2 girls and, I had to be a mom. I think what's important if you have the heart for research, then you could do research. But to be a site to do clinical trials and not know what you're doing, it's very difficult in this day and age. Because when I started 25 years ago, it was binders, right? And you would talk to the sponsor right away. Now it's very difficult because the regulatory is intense, the exams are intense, the dealing with the monitors. So it's either you decide, I'm going to do GI or I'm going to do research. I picked a long time ago. When I first started, I was doing 10% research, 90% GI. And now I realize because I'm involved in so much research, I cannot dedicate as much time to my patients, so I'm only doing 10% GI. So it's a sacrifice because you lose the patient-doctor relationship and the time with the patient that you go into medicine for.
Mm-hmm. It's always a balance, and thank you very much for the interview. Everybody go network with her on LinkedIn right now, Dr. Hazan, and stay tuned for the other interview coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.